In the introduction to the short story, A Good Man is Hard to Find, the grandmother is excited about taking a road trip with her family, despite her disapproval of the destination, Florida. After all, she's read about the Misfit, a violent criminal who's escaped prison, also headed toward that very state. In the rising action, the family sets out on their road trip, and the grandmother was the first one in the car, ready to go. Besides her, Bailey, her son, the children, bratty 8-year-old John Wesley, and disrespectful and outspoken June Starr, and the children's mother, carrying the baby, all load into the car. Hidden under the grandmother's luggage is her cat, Pitty Sing, whom she brings because she thinks the cat will miss her too much if she's gone for 3 days. As the family leaves Atlanta, the grandmother sits between her 2 grandchildren, tracks the mileage and time, chats about various interesting details of the scenery, and nitpicks Bailey about his speed. Nobody pays her much attention. The family stops at The Tower, a roadside restaurant run by Red Sammy Butts, who bosses his wife around and claims it's difficult to know who to trust these days. The grandmother tells him he's a good man. The grandmother brings up the Misfit. And when Red Sammy's wife starts talking, Red Sammy orders her away and offers the opinion, a good man is hard to find. He and the grandmother talk about better times before the family leaves. Back in the car, the grandmother recalls a plantation she visited when she was young. Hoping to revisit the place, she says she knows exactly how to get there and describes the plantation in dramatic fashion. When no one seems interested, she invents a story about a secret panel in the house that hides the family silver. John Wesley and June Starr nag their father, who eventually gives in, to go there. The grandmother directs Bailey to the dirt road that leads to the plantation when she realizes she's made a big mistake. The plantation is in Tennessee, not Georgia. The embarrassment over her mistake causes her to stir, which allows Pitty Sing to escape from his hidden basket. In the climax of the story, Pitty Sing jumps on Bailey, who crashes the car. The excited children shout, "We've had an accident!" In the falling action, after a few minutes, a big, black, battered, hearse-like automobile approaches slowly. 3 men get out of the car, and it's clear that the eldest is their leader. He wears tight jeans, no shirt, and is holding a black hat and a gun. The others have guns too. The grandmother realizes the leader looks familiar. While Bailey tries to explain their situation, the grandmother excitedly belts out, "You're the Misfit!" The Misfit tells her it would have been better if she had not recognized him. The grandmother says to the Misfit, "You wouldn't shoot a lady, would you?" The Misfit replies, "I would hate to have to." The grandmother says he's a good man without common blood who comes from nice people. The Misfit instructs his men, Bobby Lee and Hiram, to take Bailey and John Wesley to the woods. The Misfit explains he's not a good man, but there are worse. The children's mother screams and asks where her husband and son are being taken. The Misfit ignores her and talks about his father. The grandmother asks the Misfit if he prays, and he says no. 2 shots ring out from the woods. The grandmother calls out, "Bailey boy!" The Misfit casually recites a list of jobs and bizarre experiences that have marked his life. He wasn't a bad boy, although he had done something wrong and ended up in a penitentiary, but he claims he cannot remember why. The Misfit says the authorities have papers that say he killed his father, so it must have happened. In the resolution, the grandmother tries to help the Misfit, asserting that if he would pray, then Jesus would help him. The Misfit agrees, but he says he doesn't want help. Bobby Lee returns, carrying Bailey's shirt, which the Misfit puts on. The Misfit offers the children's mother the chance to take June Starr and follow her husband. She accepts. Bobby Lee and Hiram escort her to the woods with June Starr and the baby. Left alone with the Misfit, the grandmother falls nearly silent, besides murmuring about Jesus. A scream from the woods is followed by gunshots. The Misfit talks about Jesus and raising the dead when the grandmother reaches out to touch his shoulder, saying, "Why, you're one of my babies. You're one of my own children." The Misfit shoots the grandmother in her chest. In death, her legs are crossed like a child's, and her smiling face gazes up at the sky. After the Misfit instructs the men to put her with the rest of the family, he says the grandmother had the potential to be a good woman if it had been somebody there to shoot her every minute of her life. Bobby Lee says killing the family has been fun. The Misfit is annoyed and says life does not include real pleasure. Both the grandmother and the Misfit are not the people they seem to be on the surface. The grandmother claims to believe in Jesus and prides herself on being a lady, but she's actually shallow, selfish, and judgmental. The Misfit is a violent killer, yet he speaks and acts thoughtfully. The grandmother trusts Jesus to provide comfort and salvation, but is out of practice when it comes to religion. The misfit claims if he was a believer, I wouldn't be like I am now. He appears to want inspiration and salvation. Their conversation allows the grandmother to reclaim the good within herself as she strives to help another human being. She recognizes herself and the misfit as children of God, and that religion has saved her from living a hard and mean life. The grandmother's sudden religious epiphany and declaration of loving kindness overwhelms the misfit, who immediately shoots her dead. He's not ready to live a good life and be a good man. While the misfit is the vehicle through which the grandmother gains grace, he has yet to achieve that state himself. Six characters comprise the thought-provoking and terrifying short story, A Good Man is Hard to Find. The grandmother is judgmental and selfish. She longs for a time when she thinks things were better, a sentiment expressed when she speaks with Red Sammy Butts. She lives with her son Bailey and his family, and she's often critical of them. When the family is approached by the misfit, the grandmother is concerned about her own safety and shows little care for Bailey and his family. The grandmother performs one genuine act of concern in the story, and it's her final action. The misfit is a violent escaped convict and a man of contradictions. Despite his background, he blushes from embarrassment when Bailey uses foul language. While instructing his men Hiram and Bobby Lee to take the family members away to be killed, he apologizes for not wearing a shirt. He compliments his parents, yet he killed his own father, and he acknowledges this, but never takes complete responsibility for his actions. He compares himself to Jesus, yet says he's no believer. He gets into a soul-searching philosophical discussion with the grandmother, but after shooting her, he says she could have been a good woman if she were threatened with death every minute of her life. Bailey, the grandmother's son, is frustrated. He doesn't say much to the other characters, including his own children. He's not interested in what they want and only gives in to visit the plantation because he can't stand his kids' obnoxious whining. He's a classic follower that shows no original thought. The children's mother hardly speaks in the story and isn't given a name, signifying that her only purpose is to look after the children. In contrast to the grandmother and Bailey, she is selfless. Her life revolves around her children, particularly the baby, who she's always holding. June Starr is a rude little girl and is ready to say anything to anybody. She doesn't respect her elders or recognize the severity of their situation. Like her brother, she longs for adventure and cheers the accident, but she's disappointed when no one dies. John Wesley is a precocious young boy who's interested in adventure. Often bored, he's excited when the grandmother suggests visiting the plantation because of the secret panel that hides riches. He can be obnoxious and violent. He fights with his sister and ferociously kicks Bailey's car seat. Kids. The grandmother's hat, the misfit's automobile, and animals are the sinister symbols spanning Flannery O'Connor's short story, A Good Man is Hard to Find. The grandmother's hat symbolizes her selfish nature. She wears it so observers will know she's a lady, even when she dies. When the accident occurs, the grandmother's hat is damaged, though it remains pinned to her head. Once the misfit's men begin leading her family members to their deaths, the grandmother touches her hat and the brim breaks off. The narrator states she stood staring at it and she let it fall on the ground. This symbol of what it means to be a lady has been destroyed. Now able to care about someone other than herself, she reaches out to the misfit, showing forgiveness and empathy. The misfit's automobile, described as a big, black, battered hearse-like automobile, looms over the family sitting in the ditch after their accident, as if it is waiting to lead a funeral procession. The automobile symbolizes death. Not only the death of the family, but also the death of the Old South. Death has been referred to all throughout the story, including when the grandmother worries about her appearance should she end up dead on the highway when her family passes a graveyard. Finally, there are references to numerous animals in the story, such as a monkey, parrot, rabbit, hippopotamus, cat, pig, cow, and even a caterpillar. Characters and items are described using animal references. The characters as a whole show animal instincts. Now, animals exist in the moment and don't consider the consequences of their actions. And the family members also show their animal instincts when the car crashes. Even though they're stranded, they simply wait like trained animals for someone to come along. They need a shepherd to guide them and tell them what to do. Chance, grace, and spiritual blindness are the profound themes to be gleaned from a family's nightmarish road trip that is Flannery O'Connor's short story, A Good Man is Hard to Find. Chance is the occurrence of events that seem to have no obvious cause, but in A Good Man is Hard to Find, the events that lead to the family's demise do have causes. The grandmother and Bailey choose actions that eventually lead to their horrifying encounter with the misfit. Choices build upon previous choices until the situation proves impossible to escape. Bailey chooses to go to Florida, despite knowing the danger involved. The grandmother chooses to bring Pitty Sing, despite knowing how Bailey doesn't approve of her bringing the cat. And chooses to push going to the plantation, although she knows the misfit may be in the area. Lastly, Bailey chooses to give in to the pressure from the children to go to the plantation, even when it involves traveling down the deserted dirt road. The fatal conclusion marked by the family's murders would never have happened if any one of these choices hadn't been made. But chance does play a part, however, for a person of faith, like the grandmother purports to be, who believes God has a plan. The family members cannot escape their fate, but the situation leads to a moment of grace for the grandmother. Grace is a God-given moment of clarity, or epiphany, that allows people to see themselves as they truly are and to guide them towards spiritual salvation. The grandmother views herself as righteous and deserving, but she's actually selfish and judgmental, a character in need of grace indeed. Determined to be seen as a lady, the grandmother dresses for the ride, so if there's an accident, the people who find her dead on the highway would know at once that she was a lady. This callous and shallow behavior is a continuation of her treatment of her family, as she looks down on them and insults each one of them. She also lies and manipulates them. When each family member is taken away and killed, and the grandmother is left alone with the misfit, she comes to see him as a person just like her, deserving of her care and concern. This genuine action is the grandmother's saving grace. She even dies with an innocent smile on her face. Spiritual blindness is another important theme. The misfit talks respectfully to the grandmother, apologizes for being improperly dressed, is uncomfortable when Bailey talks rudely to his mother, and is sensitive to the children's mother when she misses Bailey and John Wesley. When talking with the grandmother, he's introspective, considers his actions, and shows a depth of thought. The misfit seems to have a lot of positive traits, but he's a murderer who believes that there is no pleasure but meanness. He has good inside him, but is unable to perceive it, let alone make it central to his being. Yet his final words, "It's no real pleasure in life," indicate that he is changing. Southern gentility, prayer, and the misfit are the powerful motifs in the short story masterpiece of murder that is Flannery O'Connor's A Good Man is Hard to Find. Unlocked doors, proper dress, and polite conversation represent Southern gentility, traditional values trying to keep savagery at bay. The grandmother, Red Sammy Butts, and even the misfit long for such elements of a civil society. The grandmother and Red Sammy in particular lament the loss of how good things used to be, despite the fact that they themselves don't seem like such great people. However, in the case of the misfit and the grandmother's family, savagery wins out over gentility and civilized behavior. Prayer is another major motif. The willingness to pray represents the humility of accepting help. The grandmother's idea of prayer may initially be self-serving. Her urging the misfit to pray is more a ploy to get him to spare her life than it is a plan to provide him with religious assistance. Without appealing to God through prayer, the misfit may yet have spent more time thinking about religion than the grandmother has. He has spent time pondering whether or not Jesus actually raised the dead, and deciding that this probably never happened, believes that seeking pleasure through meanness should be his goal in life. The misfit isn't interested in prayer because, as he says, "I don't want no help. I'm doing all right by myself." When it's clear the grandmother is going to be murdered, she struggles to encourage the misfit to pray, murmuring, "Jesus, Jesus," meaning Jesus will help you. However, the way the grandmother is speaking, it sounds as if she might be cursing. The misfit agrees with her and says he is like Jesus, except Jesus had not committed a crime that could be proven, while I had committed one because they had the papers on me. The misfit, a character who doubles as a motif, adopts his alias because of the imbalance he sees between one's actions and resulting punishment. His name also alludes to his not having a recognized place in society. Although the misfit represents the personification of evil, he thinks deeply about religion and is troubled by behavior he views as inappropriate, as when Bailey speaks harshly to his mother.